Oh, friends, it has been a really long time since I got to stand in a pulpit in a sanctuary that I love, with people that I love, and I look forward to having even more of you with us in a few weeks. Will you be with me in a spirit of prayer? Spirit of wisdom and inspiration, move in and through us again this day. Stir up our hearts and our minds and our spirits, that we may receive a new and inspired word from you. Amen. So in 1986, the Richards Advertising Agency was given the task of creating a new ad campaign for the budget-friendly hotel chain Motel 6. So they called up Tom Bodett, who was a writer and commentator for National Public Radio, to come in and record some radio commercials for this new campaign. And as they were recording, Mr. Bodett ad-libbed a line at the end of the commercial. He said, pretend I'm Tom Bodett now. I'm Tom Bodett for Motel 6, and we will leave the light on for you. Over 30 years later, Tom Bodett is still the voice of Motel 6. He's the only spokesperson they have ever had, and he still ends every commercial with that same promise. We'll leave the light on for you. In this passage from the prophet Isaiah, the prophet is speaking to people who are feeling a little bit like someone has turned out all the lights. Perhaps you can identify with this feeling. I have woken up feeling this way many, many times in the past several months. You see, things are not going so well for the people of Israel. Quick history recap. God had called Moses to lead the people out of slavery in Egypt. God had made a covenant with the people, led them through the wilderness and into the land of Canaan. The people had become a nation, built a temple where they could worship and honor God. For centuries, they had seen military victory and defeat under a series of kings and generals. They had strayed from God's covenant, but God's prophets kept calling them back, reminding them of those covenant promises. But then, everything changed when the Babylonians came in and conquered the people of Israel. The temple was destroyed. Their sacred temple ornaments had fallen into foreign hands. The people were uprooted from their homes, their livelihoods, their families, and sent to live in exile in Babylon. It seems as though all of the lights have gone out. And the people started to wonder, where is God? Are we still God's people? Can we be God's people in the midst of all this change and chaos? Can I get an amen? Is God still God? And in the midst of all that wondering, Isaiah comes and brings this word of hope. This promise that God, who is still God, is even now at work in their midst. Isaiah brings this prophetic reminder that God will always leave a light on for us. This is what God says, Isaiah reminds us. I will keep you, and I will make you a covenant for a people and a light for the nations. God says, I will make you a light. Jesus says, you are the light of the world. And Tom Bodett says, we'll leave the light on for you. Light. I want you to think a minute about all the ways we experience light in our days. Sometimes we use lights to mark out our path. Anyone who's flown on an airplane has heard the flight attendant say, "In the event of an emergency, lights along the floor will guide you to the emergency exits." The soft red glow of an exit sign leads you out of the theater or the mall. We line our dark driveways and sidewalks with small solar-powered lights to illuminate a path to the front door. These lights mark the paths that are safe. They help us to move in the right direction and reorient us when we get turned around in the wrong direction. And sometimes God comes to us as that kind of a light that marks our path and guides us in the direction we should go. Sometimes a light brings comfort. The soft glow of a nightlight in a child's bedroom chases away the frightening shadows. Headlights flash on the garage door to show us that a spouse has arrived home safely from work or a child is home from a night out with friends. A flashlight illuminates the pages of a book as a camp counselor reads a story to calm anxious campers in the midst of a thunderstorm. And sometimes God comes to us as that kind of a light that comforts, a voice that whispers, "Do not be afraid, you are not alone." Sometimes lights bring us clarity or a new perspective. My mother, hi Mom. Everyone say hi to my mom in the chat box. My mother was famous for walking into rooms where my sister and I were working on homework and flipping on more lights and saying, "I don't know how you see anything in here." And my sister and I would be forced to admit that it was in fact easier to see our math equations with more lights on. Eye doctors use those really bright lights to see inside of our eyes, and doctors use light boxes to read x-rays. Reading lights clipped to our books and lighted magnifying glasses bring sharper clarity to too tiny print. Sometimes God comes to us as a moment of clarity that lets us see things from a new perspective. And we say, "Wow, I never saw things that way before." Sometimes a light can make ordinary things extraordinary. A light shining through a prism reveals tiny dancing rainbows all over the room. A diamond catches the sunlight and seems to glow from the inside of the stone. Sunlight transforms our stained glass windows into breathtaking works of art. The strike of a match turns a candle into an unspoken prayer, and hundreds of ordinary candles become a vigil for peace and a cry for justice. Sometimes God comes to us as this kind of light in these ordinary moments and ordinary people, and transforms them into glimpses of the sacred that take our breath away. And sometimes light can leave us speechless, full of awe and wonder. That big harvest moon that hangs so big and low in the sky that it feels like you could reach up and touch it. That sunrise that colors the horizon pink and peach and purple in hues that don't exist in our crayon boxes. The single spotlight that shines on center stage until the room goes completely still and the soloist takes a breath and begins to sing. 15,000 watt lamps projecting sweeping images across an IMAX screen. God can come to us in moments that leave us speechless, filled with awe and wonder. And sometimes Sometimes a light tells us that we are home. The sweeping beams from the lighthouse mark the coast and tell the ships that they've nearly reached the shore. The porch light shines over a front door, waiting to welcome us home again. Sometimes God comes to us as that whispered reminder, you are beloved, you are mine, and you are home. I hope, dear ones, that you have experienced God's light in all of these ways, as a guiding path, as a comforting presence, as a burst of clarity, as a moment of wonder, as the whispered comfort of being home. But God does not say, I am a light. God says, I will make you a light. And Jesus says, you, dear friends, you, dear humans, are the light of the world. So this is our call and our challenge, to not just recognize God's light coming to us, but to, in fact, pass on the light that we have seen and known and experienced. And if ever the world was in need of it, dear hearts, it is right now. We are called, oh friends, to illuminate paths, to offer guidance to those who are feeling lost and turned around. We are called to carry the light of comfort to those who are wandering in the darkness of fear and isolation. We are called to bring a light of wonder when the world is mired in anxiety. We can be a light that reveals the extraordinary in the midst of the ordinary. We can be lights that remind the lost and the lonely and the marginalized and the broken that they are safe and they have a home in God's family. Dear hearts, you and me, we, all of us together, we are the lights that God has left on for the world. So go forth and shine boldly, shine brightly. Amen.